Yes, guys, welcome back to the review for the first official preseason game for the 2025 season. Bombers fans, you must have been super excited with that performance. Let me know in the comments below how you think the team went, first of all, because I was really excited with that. And the thumbnail of today's video, how Essendon have shown change across this preseason and how they look already a little bit more lethal. We're going to get into that and kind of the stat that really uncovers that predominantly. We do have to talk about Isaac Kako, who was absolutely just mesmerizing in this game at times. The pressure that he brought, the physicality in that forward half of the ground, and his clinical nature. For a player to come in and do that, I know it was a practice game. Everyone gets in the comments and tells me about these videos that I'm taking too much from a practice game. I am aware, but you can still take away things. You can see players and how they're sort of, performing above what they were in the 2024 season. I think Isaac Kako, his adaptation to the AFL level is fantastic. Now, a few things just on the game styles of the two teams. You definitely saw a side in Essendon that were really dominant in this particular match from clearance. I think that started from Sam Draper. He had a really good game, but also the fact that he is up against the less experienced ruckman in Sam De Koning, it has to be said. He gave those midfielders first use, which gave Essendon a big dominance in the clearance phase of the game, but it was the Essendon high half forwards that really came into those stoppages, particularly around the ground stoppages, because if you look at the centre clearances, they weren't actually too dissimilar, but it was those around the ground and boundary line throw-ins where the Essendon high half forwards came into it and won a lot of ground ball. For the Cats, they do like to do things a little bit different. They do like to let teams come onto them a little bit more. It is how their talent is dispersed across the team. They like to intercept the ball a little bit deeper than the average team and then really hit teams on the counter. And I think even for Geelong, who won't take a lot out of this loss, I don't think, but for a really experienced professional outfit like the Cats, they'd still be happy with some of the things that they saw, because I think a lot of times on transition, they really could have hurt Essendon more, but probably just maybe lacked a little bit of polish this early in the preseason and weren't able to put away some of their chances when they looked really dangerous. I still think from a transition football perspective, Geelong are probably one of the best at doing that. Just how they can transition from defense to offense. It is amazing. Just didn't have the finishing class at the end tonight. So sort of to put that into perspective, if we do just take a look at some of the raw numbers, I'll just bring up on the computer here, having a look at the breakdown of the statistics. If you kind of first go to clearances there, 28-41 sort of tells a story about how dominant Essendon were from a midfield perspective, and that includes the high half forwards that got up to contest. If we look at the contested and uncontested possessions in this game, a little bit of a lead to Essendon, but this does show you that the Cats were definitely in the game, and particularly if you go to a post-clearance phases of the game, Geelong actually had a slight advantage there in the ground ball outside the clearance phases of the game. But that uncontested number there of 279 to 235 shows the differences in game style, a little bit how Geelong are much more of a direct side, and Essendon do like to do those slow build-ups as well when they come out of D50 and chip the ball around, uncontested marking and trying to pick through that Geelong zone. But a big stat here, if you look at the intercepts, which kind of highlights what I was saying off the top about the Cats, 81 intercepts to 70. So they do win the ball back, and they win the ball back a little bit deeper. And that's what I think, if you look at the overall stats, you look at contested possession, uncontested possession, it doesn't tell too much of a story. But if you look at where Geelong actually won the ball, we don't have any of the GPS heat maps and stuff like that in this game. So I can't really show you where Geelong were winning the ball back, but they certainly were winning it sort of more in that D50 arc between the D50 and the forward 50 area a lot of times, and they're able to transition the ball really cleverly from there. But if we go back to the midfield, the players that were in there for Essendon, the ones that I noticed the most without taking too much notice of the exact CBA numbers, Cordwell was in there and playing a big part at just getting those little handballs out in and under stuff, but also the defensive pressure that he puts on the opposition players. And Essendon's intensity and their tackling pressure in this game was pretty profound, particularly from that forward of centre mark. They were able to really press up on the Geelong defenders, put them under a lot of pressure. So it did make them a little bit more difficult for them to transition on those faster plays. Sardis, I've got to talk about Sardis because I think he's having one of those, I wouldn't say underrated pre-seasons because people are talking about him, but he's almost, for me, giving Essendon the ability to be able to play Sam Durham in the forward 50, just with the physicality, the movement that he shows there at centre bounce. Yes, Essendon fans always go on about the fact that he doesn't use the ball very well, but he doesn't really have to with the way that Essendon want to play here. He can win those clearances, use his pace, use his power, use his change of direction to be able to sort of put defenders off him a little bit and then just drive the ball inside forward 50, because what Essendon have forward of the ball now is really, really exciting. And we'll get to that as part of this sort of overall discussion about the Bombers and how they've changed. Andy McGrath, interestingly, attended 7 centre bounces and was really getting up high off the half back line when he played there, almost becoming like a little bit of that sort of strike midfielder, the one that receives the ball last and really uses the ball well inside 50 and provides that drive. We know that McGrath has that bit of bite, has that bit of speed, maybe in some ways lacks a little bit of the physicality of some of the midfielders. So just to throw him through there a little bit, just in bursts and coming off the half back line, I think really helped Essendon's ball movement. And then the other one that was in there in a meaningful way was Ben Hobbs. And I think he really did a good job playing those centre bounces and then coming up also as a high half forward to contest. He was really, really valuable from stoppages. If we have a little bit of a brief look at the stats that he had there, he was a top fantasy scorer. He had 29 disposals, including 8 tackles. So he is a guy that can put defensive pressure on. And I liked how physically gifted this midfield started to look when you had Sardis, you had Cordwell, and you had Hobbs in there, just sort of driving the legs. It looked a little bit better than, even a player like Zach Merritt, who I absolutely rate and was big in this game in a big way. It looked a little bit more, this midfield, it looked like it had a little bit more physicality to get up and down the ground than, say, Parrish and Merritt in years gone by. So that was really interesting as well. But for Essendon, where this game was won and lost, and sort of the premise of the video was about that forward line and how much more dangerous it looked. And the stat that I want to point out to everyone before we sort of talk about the players that were impacting in a big way is just this goal efficiency stat here. So if you take a look at this, Geelong, 12 goals from 58 inside 50s to Essendon, 17 goals from 47 inside 50s. The one thing that plagued the Bombers the entirety of the 2024 season was just not being able to finish their dinner, quote unquote. They would get those inside 50s, but the forward line just weren't able to. For one, the defense of the opposition transitioned the ball out of D50 way too easily, but Essendon just weren't able to be clinical in those big moments and make their forward line dynamic and dangerous enough to get off high quality shots. So that is going to be a big watch for me watching Essendon in these early rounds. Can they keep this up? Because you are relying on really, really young players, and so exciting what Kako was able to do in this game. The pressure that he brought, the dynamism. I reckon he made every player on that Essendon field walk a little bit taller with the way that he was playing in this game. And everyone got to see now what we've been watching in the under-18 season with Kako. The fact that if he gets an opportunity, just one opportunity, he's able to put you away. And that's what the best players in the game do. He's got power, he's got physicality to take on the opposition's best defenders. But it was the clinical nature with which he finished. I think there was one in that first quarter where he just got the ball in just the tiniest bit of space. He was just able to use that really quick step and that quick change of direction that he has and just finish the goal. He had 4 goals, almost had 5 goals with that Draper one, and he had 2 direct goal assists, 6 score involvements that all came to goals, so the maximum for Essendon, and he only had 14 touches. That is so Isaac Kako. That is a classic Isaac Kako game, almost 50% of the touches turning into goals. So awesome what he's been able to do. Caddy, I don't think even played in the first quarter, so he wasn't even there. But when he comes on, the forward line looks so dangerous again. Just having those hybridy types like Caddy that can affect the ball at ground, can affect the game at ground level and in the air, so dangerous. You had Harrison Jones, who was sort of floating in off a wing, who's a massive aerial presence. He picked up about 30 touches in this game, and one that didn't really notice him, but if he's getting 30 touches in the game, Essendon are definitely having a say with the ball and definitely controlling elements of the game. What Zach Merritt did, and I've been talking about this, and it's something that I've noticed heavily across this preseason, that teams are trying to get those guys that have the change of direction, they have that quick change of pace, that sort of explosivity in their movement laterally. They can just open up space, open up the angles, and if they can use both feet, and in this game, for me, that was Zach Merritt. It was Isaac Kako a little bit deeper, and it was the big one was Nick Martin. What he did in that first quarter was absolutely huge. He looks considerably better than he even did last year, and he was a force off the halfback last season, but he just seems to grow a little bit of an extra... Like when you see him coming off the half back line, you don't sort of see, oh, this is an amazing kick of the football. He looks like a ball mover, someone that gets into space, helps you progress the ball up the field, but isn't necessarily a surgical kicker. But he looked like he really had that in this game. He was able to, turn on a sixpence around that forward 50, hit up targets, and they just look so dangerous with him operating there, Merritt operating there, Caddy and Kako sort of in those deeper forward roles, Durham being that sort of power forward as well. So I don't think Essendon are missing Jake Stringer one bit. Yeah, he's got all the goals on the board, but I think they're going to be able to share this round and overall be a better team with the forward structure that they have. Going into the back line, we don't have to talk about it too much. I think they controlled the footy really well off the half back line. Zach Reed got a full game of football into him here, or pretty much a full game of football. I think he did really well from a defensive point of view. Occasionally, he looks a little bit shaky on the ball, but you've got players like Ridley back there. Mackay was 50-50 in this game. So probably from those key position defenders, there's still a little bit of a question mark. Can they hold off a really good forward line in season? In this one, they sort of had Neil, Jeremy Cameron to operate with that obviously are going to cause headaches, but Geelong are obviously going to come into the season a little bit more. So probably some question marks around that defence. I liked what the high half backs did. I talked about Andy McGrath coming into the midfield. Dylan Shield, he was really good in this game. Again, it just seems like close to the footy, close to contest, Essendon just have a lot of players buzzing around. Archie Roberts was there as well, and he did some nice things. Had a couple of moments where I think he turned over the footy, but I think he was really, really good as well. And just bringing the energy, and I think it just sort of lifted everyone from a Bombers point of view. Probably need to have a bit of a conversation about the Cats here. I think they did what they do in a preseason game. I don't think you have to read too much into this from a Geelong perspective. They won the ball back how they like to win the ball back. So I think their defensive shape was really good. Stewart and Henry back there taking a lot of intercept marks. And I think Connor O'Sullivan was just another one back there that looked really, really good. And he had a couple of marauding runs off half back where you just went, okay, this guy is a serious athlete and could be a serious force. Probably still needs to put on a little bit of muscle, but he's probably had a couple of pre-seasons now in the belt. So he's looking really good. And from a winning the footy back, I think they did really good. It was just their final product tonight. So you had players like Brian Myers, like Close in their Dangerfield. They just didn't really, I guess, have that sort of finishing polish that you'd expect from the Cats when they're sort of really purring later on in the season. I still think that when they move the ball, when they transition the ball from D50 to forward 50, they look like one of the most exciting teams in the competition. Those players that I mentioned, the midfield, I mean, it does look a little bit one-paced when, say, a Max Holmes isn't there and you've got players like Bowes and Nevitt, Jai Clark in there as well. They're a little bit maybe lack the quality of some of the best midfielders. If you've got Holmes, if you've got Dangerfield, it obviously looks a lot more dynamic. Atkins comes in as a bit of a defensively minded midfield. So I think they've got pieces that they can swing around. They do tend to be a side that isn't as worried about clearances. They can't be thrashed in the clearance like they were tonight. I think that was too heavy one-sided, but they will concede clearances. They'll win the ball back off you around that, D50 wedge zone and just transition the ball brilliantly with those runners. Another player that really impressed me again was Dempsey off that wing. He just runs and runs and runs. So not too much for the Cats. I think the big story here was the Bombers and just how they're really progressing this team under Brad Scott for, I guess it's like the third season under Brad Scott. So they look like they're moving the ball much more quickly. They've got much more dynamism. And more importantly, and the big one for this game, is that efficiency in front of goal with Kako, with Caddy, with Merritt, with Martin setting up the play. They're able to just really, really hurt teams when they move the ball inside 50, which is something we couldn't have said about them in 2024. So let me know what you think, Bombers fans. If you agree with my take on the game, I thought that was really exciting. I love to get footy back in a proper stream, watching it on KO there. So that was great. And I'll see you guys next time.